This has been a Rumble early access, so go ahead and check out Rumble if you wanted to get this seen early. So guys, we are diving into today's topic as it's time to accelerate with the power of fellows, as we're going to speed through and look at the brand new cards out of the Powers of Fellow structure deck that focuses around Junk Warrior and the new, I guess, archetype you could say around it. I mean, it's more like the archetype around Junk Warrior, but that's kind of the key, is we're going to be looking at all the new cards. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's going to mean for beginners, as this is going to be our in a way, brand new starter structure deck for the next coming year, I'm assuming, or whenever this is released. So we pretty much are only getting one structure every year now, I think, is the point of it. But, you know, we're going to be talking about it today, and we're going to be going for it. But first, I do want to let you guys know this was on Rumble first, so you know to go ahead and ride the wave to 100 followers on here on Rumble. So if you're watching this, like I said, as early access, remember to go ahead and follow if you are having it, like, you know, your own Rumble thing. You know, if you have your own, go ahead, check it out and let us know, because we are going to early access here, so you get access to this first before it shows up on YouTube. And go ahead and check us out on YouTube to get everything else. And also remember to follow the Instagram so you get updates, because that's where these hints are coming for these videos, so otherwise you haven't seen them. But jumping into it, we're going to be talking about the structure deck, and we're going to go straight into the archetype, as we have our first one being our first retrain, as all of the monsters are retrains. But it's really cool because they weren't really a part of an archetype before, so it's time to see them tied together, as we have Full Speed Warrior. And it's time, as this was actually one of my favorite cards that I saw in 5Ds, and I actually just love the addition of the little what is it called, like they wear all the little scarves that Junk Warrior has. I just really love it. I just think it's a cool addition. But going into Full Speed Warrior first, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Junk Synchron or one spell/trap that mentions Junk Warrior from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Full Speed Warrior once per turn. And then monsters that mention Junk Warrior and Synchro monsters with Warrior in their original names that you control gain 900 attack during your battle phase only. Really cool. Jumping into the next one, we have Anchorbolt Hedgehog. Now, I really like Anchorbolt Hedgehog just because he's so cute. And Anchorbolt Hedgehog, funny enough, is like one of my favorites, only because, you know, if you've ever watched the original 5Ds, I think a lot of people always thought, you know, the actual Quillbolt Hedgehog was so cute. And I always think that it's really cute that, you know, Yusei had all these little funny animals that kind of don't really synergize together, but they're a part of like his little group of things. I don't know why I'm talking about this fully here, but I'm gonna get into the effect. I really like Anchorbolt Hedgehog. Point is, if you control a Junk Warrior or a monster that mentions it other than Anchorbolt Hedgehog, and this card is in your graveyard, as a quick effect, you can special summon this card in defense position. Also, you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except Synchro monsters. You can only use this effect of Anchorbolt Hedgehog once per turn, so it does synchro lock you, but I think it's actually a very neat monster, and I'm very glad that this retrain actually helps with the archetype a bit. So we will be moving into our next one, that being Scrap Synchron. Now, Scrap Synchron is really interesting, as this is, yes, a Scrap monster, but also it is now a Synchron, so it is a part of the tuning or Synchron archetype. So getting into it for the effect, for a Synchro Summon, you can substitute this card for any one Synchron tuner, so very cool. You can only use each effect of the following effects of Scrap Synchron once per turn. If you Synchro Summon a monster that mentions a Synchron tuner as material, this card in your hand can also be used as material, so pretty cool. And then if a monster or monsters that mentions Junk Warrior and or a Synchro monster with Warrior in its original name that you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you could banish this card from your field or graveyard instead, offering protection and also being a way to get your Synchros online. Very cool. Now we move into the last of the main deck monsters that have been retrained, as we have Supersonic Chick, being a retrain of Sonic Chick, which I really like. And additionally, Supersonic Chick states that if a tuner or tuners is sent to your graveyard, even during the damage step, you could special summon this card from your graveyard if it was there when this card was sent, or your hand even if not, but you banish it when it leaves the field. Then if Junk Warrior or another monster that mentions it is on the field, you can change all monsters your opponent controls with 19 or 100 or more attack to defense position. Also, you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except Synchro monsters. You can only use this effect of Supersonic Chick once per turn. I think it's really interesting that instead of it having its originally, Supersonic Chick was like, I think it's Obnoxious Celtic Guardian, where if it was in defense position, it couldn't be destroyed by monsters with 1900 or more attack. Now, Supersonic Chick's effect instead switches all monsters with 1900 or more attack to defense. I think it's pretty cool because it allows the monsters that you summon to run them over, is what I'm guessing. But like I said, there's no inclination of links, so, you know, they can't go to defense. So it's kind of funny because this wouldn't do anything against link monsters, but hey, it is what it is. Product of its time and still pretty cool. Moving into our first extra deck monster, we have Scrap Warrior. As like I said, we actually first have our first Scrap monster that's also a part of this like warrior, technically in name, Synchro archetype. So pretty cool. This one is able to be made with Scrap Synchron plus one or more non-tuner monsters, and then if this card is Synchro summoned, you can add to your hand or send to the graveyard one Junk Synchron or one card that mentions Junk Warrior from your deck. You can only use each or this effect of Scrap Warrior once per turn, and then the activated effects of monsters that mention Junk Warrior and Synchro monsters with Warrior in their original names that you control cannot be negated except Scrap Warrior. So really cool. I think this is a very unique card. I think I like the fact that this also lets you add or send cards you need, but additionally on top, it allows you to have your Warrior and Junk Warrior by extension, their monsters, their effects cannot be negated. So that means stuff like, I think Junk Berserker pops cards, or Junk Destroyer. Berserker, if I'm right, banishes, Archer banishes, I think. All of them have really unique effects, but the point is this means they can't be interacted with. So the only way you could interact would be to negate the Scrap Warrior, which I think is just really cool. And I think it's a really good addition to this like archetype or deck. Now we go into the boss, and the cover art card probably being Junk Warrior Extreme. I really love the concept of it. Extreme, I don't know if it needed that. I think it would have rather been called like Accelerated Junk Warrior or something. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I like Junk Warrior Extreme. The name works. It's just, I thought maybe mechanically it's like it's extreme, I guess. You know, it's like one of those things where like it's radical, if you catch my drift. But the point is, I really like the monster. I was a big Junk Warrior fan anyways. I just always felt like this card was underutilized. And going into Junk Warrior Extreme, we're going to see exactly how we utilize Junk Warrior better, as it takes Junk Synchron plus any one or more non-tuner monsters. If this card is Synchro summoned, you can special summon as many level 2 or lower monsters from your graveyard as possible, but they cannot activate their effects this turn. Also, you can only special summon once for the rest of this turn. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can banish this card, special summon one Junk Synchro monster from your extra deck. This is treated as a Synchro summon. You can only use each effect of Junk Warrior Extreme once per turn. So very cool. And also this covers for the entire Junk Synchro archetype, so it's actually really cool. Like I said, there's a bunch of them. You have Junk Destroyer, I think Junk Berserker, Junk Archer, Junk Gardener, and even Junk Warrior, so to allow you to do even more damage if you wanted to attack. So I think it's a very cool concept, and I really like that. Moving into our first of the spells, and I really like this one being Synchro Fellows. This one's probably, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's, this is the best card in the archetype, which allows you to add one Junk Synchron and one monster that mentions Junk Warrior or Stardust Dragon from the deck to the hand, and then you discard one, so really cool. You can banish this card from your graveyard, and then you target a Synchro monster you control. You decrease its level by 1, then during your main phase this turn, you can normal summon one Synchron monster in addition to your normal summon / set. You can only gain this effect once per turn, and then you can only activate one Synchro Fellows per turn. So the reason this is so big is that this is clearly a way to get Junk Synchron once in rotation, but also let you put any of the monsters that you need from both the Junk Warrior archetype or Stardust Dragon, technically, archetype or deck or Stardust deck into the graveyard, so that you can then, in theory, go ahead and eventually normal summon Junk Warrior immediately, or Junk Synchron immediately to get that monster back, or vice versa, allow you to combo later on so that you can use the effect to decrease one of your Synchros level by 1, normal summon Junk Synchron, and use Junk Synchron's effect to pull out a monster from the graveyard. I really like that. I think it's really cool, and it gives you the ability to kind of loop, but also it keeps Junk Synchron as like the main focus, being that normal summon monster that pulls the monster out of the grave so you can Synchro. I still like that, and I really love the design of this card. I think it's really good for both archetypes or both sides of the deck, whether it's Junk Warrior based or Stardust Dragon as well. Going into our final card, and probably I would say the one that definitely could have been done better, being Synchro One Way. I really like the concept of this card. I'm just not really thrilled with how they designed the second part of its effect, but we'll get to it in a second. So Synchro One Way first allows you to add to your hand or special summon one level 1 tuner monster from your deck or graveyard. Then if this card is in your graveyard and you control Junk Warrior or a monster that mentions it, you can set this card, but you banish it when it leaves the field. And then you can only use one Synchro One-Way effect per turn, and only once that turn. So starting off, what's the most good thing about this card? I actually don't hate the first effect of this card. I think this card's actually really good for a few reasons. I think the main reason is this. If you're playing a deck like this and you had just the structure. I think what's cool is it pulls out any one tuner. It has to be a level 1 tuner, but the point is there are options. I think Effect Veiler's in the structure deck as well, but the point is you pull out Scrap Synchron. So in theory, if there was a way to synchro on your turn, there are options to pull out a tuner because maybe you do need to get that level 1 tuner onto the field. There are also other level 1 tuners in the deck in terms of like the actual whole game. So if you're just plugging in random level 1 tuners, stuff like Jet Synchron is also a very good one in my opinion. I think there's a level 1 that lets you synchro on your opponent's turn, so that's also a good tuner to have. But the point is, having access to any level 1 tuner monster from your deck or graveyard is actually just really good because you can either add it to your hand or special summon it. So this card is not bad in that regard. Now, where I think this card struggles with is actually its secondary effect. So I don't really care that it resets itself. I think what this card could have done instead was actually combine the effect of a card that we saw in the anime, that being Urgent Tuning, and allow this card to function that way, where instead of it saying that if you control, or if this card is in your graveyard and you control Junk Warrior or a monster that mentions it, instead of being able to set it, you should have been able to banish this card and then immediately go ahead and perform a Synchro Summon. So the reason I say that is, I think it's a really cool concept that if you were able to do that, then this card becomes, I think, a lot better because now you don't have to worry about being able to perform the synchro. So like say for instance they hand trapped your Extreme, so you still have one synchro left, but the problem is now you don't have any way to actually turn it, like get it off the field and turn it into like a Junk Warrior for instance. So if you had synchro one way and it had that effect, you could banish it and then go ahead and perform a synchro summon. It'd be your last synchro summon, but at least you'd be able to perform the synchro that way. So I think that would be a really cool concept instead. But like I said, that's the only thing I wish they could have done, because otherwise synchro one way is okay because you reset it instead. But I just don't really see, unless there's like a card that you summon and actually allows you to do more like synchro summoning combos, there was no reason to print or use this card, because yes, it pulls out any level 1 tuner monster like I said, it's just that it doesn't actually do anything for this deck is my problem. So yeah, this is like the worst card, I think everybody agrees. But yes, that's the real problem with that card. But now let's cover everything and let's just talk about what this means for beginners, because I think that's the key. I think when we look at this, when the structure deck comes out, I think what makes this deck interesting is that it's a real good introduction to synchros. I'm one of the few people that, like, if I had to pick the mechanics, I usually don't like being introduced to beginners. I don't personally like synchros being introduced to people, and my main reason why is I always think the mechanic is it's not hard to understand. It's just that it's a little bit harder to achieve because it doesn't include for like disruption interactions. So like if someone knows you're playing a synchro deck, they usually know to get rid of your tuner to keep you from synchroing, or if you're not synchroing conventionally, it makes it harder when you play other synchro strategies. So I always feel like teaching someone Xyz or links are easier because the materials are roughly the same all the time. Whereas with tuners, you have to, or synchros, you have to remember your tuners are needed for your synchros. You have to match levels, and then sometimes you don't have the right pieces. So it's like, it takes a little bit more skill, I think, and understanding of the game to do it. But I think this deck actually does it a very good way. It showcases that in order to do synchros, you need to slowly get your pieces acquired. It shows the importance of having a tuner like Junk Synchron, which always gets you a resource back when it's normal summoned, so that you can constantly do your synchro summoning. And it also shows the fact that you have your monsters that bring back lots of resources, so you can do it on the next turn. I think that's why Extreme, actually, if you don't look at it from that perspective of making a like going second version of this deck, a going first version of this deck could be made sense of like Extreme brings back all the materials so that you can probably synchro on the next turn. So I think that's pretty interesting. Or bring the materials back, so like maybe if you set up like a quick synchro monster like Excel Synchron for instance, or like a quick draw Synchron for instance, or not quick draw, why wasn't I was blanking on it, not Revolution Synchron, basically any Synchron that can synchro summon on the opponent's turn, or Formula Synchron, yeah. If any of them have access to synchro summon on your opponent's turn, it shows that you can summon them and allow you to synchro that way. So it is very important to understand that concept, because I think that's like not the bread and butter, but it's a very good stepping stone in understanding how you're supposed to like elevate your strategy when you're playing synchros. And it does allow the beginning player to understand that as they start to play the deck more, which I think most strategies do, they reward you for more play. That's where I think this deck will only allow the player who's starting with this deck to get better as they start to play the strategy more. It has OTK enables. I think with the full set list that they showed for the structure deck, you have access to some negate monsters. You have access to the entire, I think, junk archetype for the most part, the synchros. So it's actually pretty solid. Like I said, it's a synchro deck, so you can also step your way into other synchro monsters you add outside of the strategy. So I think for beginners, this isn't a bad one. Now, do I think it's as good as the Blue Eyes structure? I think that's up in the air, and I'm not saying this because I liked Blue Eyes more than this. I actually like synchros, or and I like Jack. I mean Jack 5Ds. I like all that stuff a little bit more than DM's stuff. Not always, but like I watched it and I relate more to 5Ds. The point is, I think when it comes to a beginning aspect, I think the Blue Eyes structure was a bit easier to understand. Well, I think for this one, the problem is it's more combo intensive. So if the player that is getting this deck isn't very comfortable with like long combos, or like understanding longer combo strings to establish a board, because there's not really any there's not like a true light in this deck. There isn't a synchro monster to sit on directly. You know what I mean? You could sit on like Spirit Dragon, for instance. There is no like Tyrant Dragon to summon. There's no like trap card that pops a lot of cards in the form of something like I think it's like Majesty with Eyes of Blue, or is the card, or whatever it's called. I'll remember it later. The point is, there is like Synchro One Way, which is good to like what is it called? Wishes with Eyes of Blue, like that card. But the point is, we still are in a situation where a lot of the cards in the Blue Eyes deck could actually do a lot of leg lifting for someone who's not as comfortable with the game. This deck is definitely like, you got to get a bit more comfortable with understanding how to do combos in order to perform them better. And I think this is where I don't hate this deck. I think it's actually gonna be really fun for a lot of people to get, and it's actually going to be a pretty decent budget deck, I think, to its whatever it's supposed to do. But I do think that when we're talking about this in the grand scheme of things, I do think this is an okay deck, and I think all the cards in the analyze out of here, I wish some of them did a little bit more, but I'm not going to get angry. I think they're fine retrains, and they made this deck pretty balanced for the most part. I don't think it has anything too broken, which, to be fair to some people, could be a shame, but I digress. I want to close out the video here. So like I said, this has been an early access for Rumble. When you guys get this on YouTube, remember to go ahead and subscribe. But remember, we are on Rumble to finish off this video here because it's early access. So remember to go ahead and join the wave. And remember, 100 followers is what we're aiming here. But as always, I'm signing off. Leave some comments down below for me so I can see what you think. And as always, this has been Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.